Adolf Hitler, World War II. Early diplomatic successes. Alliance with Japan. In February 1938, on the advice of his newly appointed foreign minister, the strongly pro-Japanese Joachim von Ribbentrop, Hitler ended the Sino-German alliance with the Republic of China to instead enter into an alliance with the more modern and powerful Empire of Japan. Hitler announced German recognition of Manchukuo, the Japanese-occupied state in Manchuria, and renounced German claims to their former colonies in the Pacific held by Japan. Hitler ordered an end to arms shipments to China and recalled all German officers working with the Chinese army. In retaliation, Chinese General Chiang Kai-shek cancelled all Sino-German economic agreements, depriving the Germans of many Chinese raw materials. Austria and Czechoslovakia. On March 12, 1938, Hitler announced the unification of Austria with Nazi Germany in the Anschluss. Hitler then turned his attention to the ethnic German population of the Sudetenland region of Czechoslovakia. On 28 March 29, 1938, Hitler held a series of secret meetings in Berlin with Konrad Henlein of the Sudeten German Party, the largest of the ethnic German parties of the Sudetenland. The men agreed that Henlein would demand increased autonomy for Sudeten Germans from the Czechoslovakian government, thus providing a pretext for German military action against Czechoslovakia. In April 1938, Henlein told the foreign minister of Hungary that whatever the Czech government might offer, he would always raise still higher demands. He wanted to sabotage an understanding by any means because this was the only method to blow up Czechoslovakia quickly. In private, Hitler considered the Sudeten issue unimportant. His real intention was a war of conquest against Czechoslovakia. In April, Hitler ordered the OKW to prepare for Fall Grün, Case Green, the code name for an invasion of Czechoslovakia. As a result of intense French and British diplomatic pressure, on 5 September Czechoslovakian President Edvard Beneš unveiled the fourth plan for constitutional reorganization of his country, which agreed to most of Henlein's demands for Sudeten autonomy. Henlein's party responded to Beneš's offer by instigating a series of violent clashes with the Czechoslovakian police that led to the declaration of martial law in certain Sudeten districts. Germany was dependent on imported oil. A confrontation with Britain over the Czechoslovakian dispute could curtail Germany's oil supplies. This forced Hitler to call off Fall Grün, originally planned for October 1, 1938. On 29 September, Hitler, Neville Chamberlain, Edouard Allier, and Mussolini attended a one-day conference in Munich that led to the Munich Agreement, which handed over the Sudetenland districts to Germany. Chamberlain was satisfied with the Munich conference, calling the outcome peace for our time, while Hitler was angered about the missed opportunity for war in 1938. He expressed his disappointment in a speech on 9 October in Saarbrücken. In Hitler's view, the British brokered peace, although favorable to the ostensible German demands, was a diplomatic defeat which spurred his intent of limiting British power to pave the way for the eastern expansion of Germany. As a result of the summit, Hitler was selected Time magazine's Man of the Year for 1938. In late 1938 and early 1939, the continuing economic crisis caused by rearmament forced Hitler to make major defense cuts. In his Export or Die speech of January 30, 1939, he called for an economic offensive to increase German foreign exchange holdings to pay for raw materials such as high-grade iron needed for military weapons. On March 15, 1939, in violation of the Munich Accord and possibly as a result of the deepening economic crisis requiring additional assets, Hitler ordered the Wehrmacht to invade Prague, and from Prague Castle he proclaimed Bohemia and Moravia a German protectorate. Start of World War II. In private discussions in 1939, Hitler declared Britain the main enemy to be defeated and that Poland's obliteration was a necessary prelude for that goal. The eastern flank would be secured and land would be added to Germany's Lebensraum. Offended by the British guarantee on March 31, 1939 of Polish independence, he said, "I shall brew them a devil's drink." In a speech in Wilhelmshaven for the launch of the battleship Tirpitz on 1 April, he threatened to denounce the Anglo-German naval agreement if the British continued to guarantee Polish independence, which he perceived as an encirclement policy. Poland was to either become a German satellite state or it would be neutralized in order to secure the Reich's eastern flank and prevent a possible British blockade. Hitler initially favored the idea of a satellite state, But upon its rejection by the Polish government, he decided to invade and made this the main foreign policy goal of 1939. On 3 April, Hitler ordered the military to prepare for fall-wise, case-wide, the plan for invading Poland on 25 August. In a Reichstag speech on 28 April, he renounced both the Anglo-German Naval Agreement and the German-Polish Non-Aggression Pact. Historians such as William Carr, Gerhard Weinberg, and Ian Kershaw have argued that one reason for Hitler's rush to war was his fear of an early death. He had repeatedly claimed that he must lead Germany into war before he got too old, as his successors might lack his strength of will. Hitler was concerned that a military attack against Poland could result in a premature war with Britain. Hitler's foreign minister and former ambassador to London, Joachim von Ribbentrop, assured him that neither Britain nor France would honor their commitments to Poland. Accordingly, on August 22, 1939, Hitler ordered a military mobilization against Poland. This plan required tacit Soviet support, and the Non-Aggression Pact, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, between Germany and the Soviet Union, led by Joseph Stalin, included a secret agreement to partition Poland between the two countries. Contrary to Ribbentrop's prediction that Britain would sever Anglo-Polish ties, Britain and Poland signed the Anglo-Polish alliance on August 25, 1939. This, along with news from Italy that Mussolini would not honor the Pact of Steel, prompted Hitler to postpone the attack on Poland from 25 August to 1 September. Hitler unsuccessfully tried to maneuver the British into neutrality by offering them a non-aggression guarantee on 25 August. He then instructed Ribbentrop to present a last-minute peace plan with an impossibly short time limit in an effort to blame the imminent war on British and Polish inaction. On September 1, 1939, Germany invaded western Poland under the pretext of having been denied claims to the Free City of Danzig and the right to extraterritorial roads across the Polish corridor, which Germany had ceded under the Versailles Treaty. In response, Britain and France declared war on Germany on 3 September, surprising Hitler and prompting him to angrily ask Ribbentrop, "Now what?" France and Britain did not act on their declarations immediately, and on 17 September, Soviet forces invaded eastern Poland. The fall of Poland was followed by what contemporary journalists dubbed the Phony War or Sitzkrieg, sitting war. Hitler instructed the two newly appointed Gauleiters of northwestern Poland, Albert Forster of Reichsgau Danzig West Prussia and Arthur Greiser of Reichsgau Varderland, to Germanize their areas, with no questions asked about how this was accomplished. In Forster's area, ethnic Poles merely had to sign forms stating that they had German blood. In contrast, Greiser agreed with Himmler and carried out an ethnic cleansing campaign towards Poles. Greiser soon complained that Forster was allowing thousands of Poles to be accepted as racial Germans and thus endangered German racial purity. Hitler refrained from getting involved. This inaction has been advanced as an example of the theory of working towards the Führer, in which Hitler issued vague instructions and expected his subordinates to work out policies on their own. Another dispute pitched one side represented by Heinrich Himmler and Greiser, who championed ethnic cleansing in Poland, against another represented by Göring and Hans Frank, Governor-General of occupied Poland, who called for turning Poland into the granary of the Reich. On February 12, 1940, the dispute was initially settled in favor of the Göring-Frank view, which ended the economically disruptive mass expulsions. On May 15, 1940, Himmler issued a memo entitled Some Thoughts on the Treatment of Alien Population in the East, calling for the expulsion of the entire Jewish population of Europe into Africa and the reduction of the Polish population to a leaderless class of laborers. Hitler called Himmler's memo good and correct, and, ignoring Göring and Frank, implemented the Himmler-Greiser policy in Poland. On 9 April, German forces invaded Denmark and Norway. On the same day Hitler proclaimed the birth of the Greater Germanic Reich, his vision of the united empire of Germanic nations of Europe in which the Dutch, Flemish, and Scandinavians were joined into a racially pure polity under German leadership. In May 1940, Germany attacked France, and conquered Luxembourg, the Netherlands, and Belgium. These victories prompted Mussolini to have Italy join forces with Hitler on 10 June. France and Germany signed an armistice on 22 June. Kershaw notes that Hitler's popularity within Germany, and German support for the war, reached its peak when he returned to Berlin on 6 July from his tour of Paris. Following the unexpected swift victory, Hitler promoted 12 generals to the rank of Field Marshal during the 1940 Field Marshal ceremony. Britain, whose troops were forced to evacuate France by sea from Dunkirk, continued to fight alongside other British dominions in the Battle of the Atlantic. Hitler made peace overtures to the new British leader, Winston Churchill, and upon their rejection he ordered a series of aerial attacks on Royal Air Force air bases and radar stations in southeast England. On 7 September the systematic nightly bombing of London began. The German Luftwaffe failed to defeat the Royal Air Force in what became known as the Battle of Britain. By the end of September, Hitler realized that air superiority for the invasion of Britain, in Operation Sea Lion, could not be achieved, and ordered the operation postponed. The nightly air raids on British cities intensified and continued for months, including London, Plymouth, and Coventry. On September 27, 1940, the Tripartite Pact was signed in Berlin by Saburo Kurosu of Imperial Japan, Hitler, and Italian Foreign Minister Chano, and later expanded to include Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria, thus yielding the Axis powers. Hitler's attempt to integrate the Soviet Union into the anti-British bloc failed after inconclusive talks between Hitler and Molotov in Berlin in November, and he ordered preparations for the invasion of the Soviet Union. In early 1941, German forces were deployed to North Africa, the Balkans, and the Middle East. In February, German forces arrived in Libya to bolster the Italian presence. In April, Hitler launched the invasion of Yugoslavia, quickly followed by the invasion of Greece. In May, German forces were sent to support Iraqi rebel forces fighting against the British and to invade Crete. Path to defeat. On June 22, 1941, contravening the Hitler-Stalin Non-Aggression Pact of 1939, 4 to 5 million Axis troops attacked the Soviet Union. This offensive, codenamed Operation Barbarossa, was intended to destroy the Soviet Union and seize its natural resources for subsequent aggression against the Western powers. The invasion conquered a huge area, including the Baltic republics, Belarus, and West Ukraine. By early August, Axis troops had advanced 500 kilometers, 310 miles, and won the Battle of Smolensk. Hitler ordered Army Group Center to temporarily halt its advance to Moscow and divert its panzer groups to aid in the encirclement of Leningrad and Kiev. His generals disagreed with this change, having advanced within 400 kilometers, 250 miles, of Moscow, and his decision caused a crisis among the military leadership. The pause provided the Red Army with an opportunity to mobilize fresh reserves. Historian Russell Stolfi considers it to be one of the major factors that caused the failure of the Moscow offensive, which was resumed in October 1941 and ended disastrously in December. During this crisis, Hitler appointed himself as head of the Oberkommando des Heeres. On December 7, 1941, Japan attacked the American fleet based at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. 4 days later, Hitler declared war against the United States. On December 18, 1941, Himmler asked Hitler what to do with the Jews of Russia. To which Hitler replied, "Als Partisan ausrotten, exterminate them as partisans." Israeli historian Yehuda Bauer has commented that the remark is probably as close as historians will ever get to a definitive order from Hitler for the genocide carried out during the Holocaust. In late 1942, German forces were defeated in the Second Battle of El Alamein, thwarting Hitler's plans to seize the Suez Canal in the Middle East. Overconfident in his own military expertise following the earlier victories in 1940, Hitler became distrustful of his army high command and began to interfere in military and tactical planning, with damaging consequences. In December 1942 and January 1943, Hitler's repeated refusal to allow their withdrawal at the Battle of Stalingrad led to the almost total destruction of the Sixth Army. Over 200,000 Axis soldiers were killed and 235,000 were taken prisoner. Thereafter came a decisive strategic defeat at the Battle of Kursk. Hitler's military judgment became increasingly erratic, and Germany's military and economic position deteriorated, as did Hitler's health. Following the Allied invasion of Sicily in 1943, Mussolini was removed from power by Victor Emmanuel III after a vote of no confidence of the Grand Council. Marshal Pietro Badoglio, placed in charge of the government, soon surrendered to the Allies. Throughout 1943 and 1944, the Soviet Union steadily forced Hitler's armies into retreat along the Eastern Front. On June 6, 1944, the Western Allied armies landed in northern France in one of the largest amphibious operations in history, Operation Overlord. Many German officers concluded that defeat was inevitable and that continuing under Hitler's leadership would result in the complete destruction of the country. Between 1939 and 1945, there were many plans to assassinate Hitler, some of which proceeded to significant degrees. The most well-known, the 20th of July plot of 1944, came from within Germany and was at least partly driven by the increasing prospect of a German defeat in the war. Part of Operation Valkyrie, the plot involved Klaus von Stauffenberg planting a bomb in one of Hitler's headquarters, the Wolfslair at Rastenburg. Hitler narrowly survived because staff officer Heinz Brandt moved the briefcase containing the bomb behind the leg of the heavy conference table, which deflected much of the blast. Later, Hitler ordered savage reprisals resulting in the execution of more than 4,900 people. Defeat and death. By late 1944, both the Red Army and the Western Allies were advancing into Germany. Recognizing the strength and determination of the Red Army, Hitler decided to use his remaining mobile reserves against the American and British troops, which he perceived as far weaker. On 16 December, he launched the Ardennes offensive to incite disunity among the Western Allies and perhaps convince them to join his fight against the Soviets. The offensive failed after some temporary successes. With much of Germany in ruins in January 1945, Hitler spoke on the radio, "However grave as the crisis may be at this moment, it will, despite everything, be mastered by our unalterable will." Acting on his view that Germany's military failures meant it had forfeited its right to survive as a nation, Hitler ordered the destruction of all German industrial infrastructure before it could fall into Allied hands. Minister for Armaments Albert Speer was entrusted with executing this scorched earth policy, but he secretly disobeyed the order. Hitler's hope to negotiate peace with the United States and Britain was encouraged by the death of U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt on April 12, 1945, but contrary to his expectations, this caused no rift among the Allies. On 20th of April, his 56th birthday, Hitler made his last trip from the Führer bunker, Führer shelter, to the surface. In the ruined garden of the Reich Chancellery, he awarded Iron Crosses to boy soldiers of the Hitler Youth, who were now fighting the Red Army at the front near Berlin. By 21st of April, Georgy Zhukov's first Belarusian front had broken through the defenses of General Gotthard Heinrich's army group Vistula during the Battle of the Seelow Heights and advanced to the outskirts of Berlin. In denial about the dire situation, Hitler placed his hopes on the undermanned and under-equipped Armee Teilung Steiner, Army Detachment Steiner, commanded by Waffen-SS General Felix Steiner. Hitler ordered Steiner to attack the northern flank of the salient, while the German Ninth Army was ordered to attack northward in a pincer attack. During a military conference on 22 April, Hitler asked about Steiner's offensive. He was told that the attack had not been launched and that the Soviets had entered Berlin. Hitler asked everyone except Wilhelm Keitel, Alfred Jodl, Hans Krebs, and Wilhelm Bergdorf to leave the room, then launched into a tirade against the treachery and incompetence of his commanders, culminating in his declaration, for the first time, that everything was lost. He announced that he would stay in Berlin until the end and then shoot himself. By 23 April the Red Army had surrounded Berlin, and Goebbels made a proclamation urging its citizens to defend the city. That same day, Göring sent a telegram from Berchtesgaden, arguing that since Hitler was isolated in Berlin, Göring should assume leadership of Germany. Göring set a deadline, after which he would consider Hitler incapacitated. Hitler responded by having Göring arrested, and in his last will and testament of 29 April, he removed Göring from all government positions. On 28 April Hitler discovered that Himmler, who had left Berlin on 20 April, was trying to negotiate a surrender to the Western Allies. He ordered Himmler's arrest and had Hermann Fegelein, Himmler's SS representative at Hitler's HQ in Berlin, shot. After midnight on 29 April, Hitler married Eva Braun in a small civil ceremony in the Führer bunker. Later that afternoon, Hitler was informed of the execution of Mussolini, which presumably increased his determination to avoid capture. On April 30, 1945, when Soviet troops were within a block or two of the Reich Chancellery, Hitler shot himself in the head and Braun bit into a cyanide capsule. Their bodies were carried outside to the garden behind the Reich Chancellery, where they were placed in a bomb crater, doused with petrol, and set on fire as the Red Army shelling continued. Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz and Joseph Goebbels assumed Hitler's roles as head of state and chancellor respectively. Berlin surrendered on 2 May. Records in the Soviet archives obtained after the fall of the Soviet Union state that the remains of Hitler, Braun, Joseph, and Magda Goebbels, the 6 Goebbels children, General Hans Krebs, and Hitler's dogs were repeatedly buried and exhumed. On April 4, 1970, a Soviet KGB team used detailed burial charts to exhume 5 wooden boxes at the Smersh facility in Magdeburg. The remains from the boxes were burned, crushed, and scattered into the Biedritz River, a tributary of the Elbe. According to Kershaw, the corpses of Braun and Hitler were fully burned when the Red Army found them, and only a lower jaw with dental work could be identified as Hitler's remains.